Georgia Tech, one of the most historic programs in all of college football, 4 national titles, the first of any Southern team, and recently they've had some troubles with coming back to national relevance, but let's get into departures for the Yellow Jackets. Jeff Sims is gone, the quarterback who showed a lot of promise but never was able to put it all together. He had a particular problem his freshman year where he would fumble the ball anytime he got hit by a defensive lineman, so there was that concern. But he's gone to Nebraska to join Matt Rhule's project in Lincoln. That's a significant loss because Jeff Sims definitely had the ability to be a good Power 5 starting quarterback, and so you'll have to replace him. Demetrius Knight is gone. He was sort of an anchor for your linebacking core. Forced a lot of turnovers. That was so important to how Georgia Tech got stops on the defensive side of the ball. And then Hassan Hall, running back, he would just go off and really give you a lot of offensive production, so that is a huge loss. He was so essential to your upset win against Pitt. Very unfortunate to lose him. But arrivals, Haynes King is arriving from Texas A&M. He didn't really have a solid career there, and part of that you would say is partially his fault and partially Jimbo Fisher's offense. It's been described as one of the most complex offenses for a college quarterback to learn, and can sometimes just hinder the quarterback's ability simply because it is so complex. So Haynes King looking for some redemption, looking to prove that he actually deserves to be a Power 5 quarterback. Interesting that he chose Georgia Tech. Not really sure why, other than Atlanta being a big media capital. It's the media capital of the South. Perhaps he wanted to see what Brent Key was doing and be a part of that. And anyway, Andre White Jr., linebacker, comes in also from Texas A&M. And Travion Cooley, running back, who transfers from Louisville. This is one of the larger transfer classes that you've seen from Georgia Tech, and if you look at recruiting to 2024, you've got a lot of 4-stars coming in for Brent Key's staff, and it's eyebrow raising. Georgia Tech had a good recruiting class. Jeff Collins' first year, I believe they were ranked somewhere around the 20s nationally, just based on the recruits' gradings on 24/7 Sports, and that really excited a lot of people. But Coach Collins' actual tactics during the game were not up to snuff with the Power 5. And we saw as soon as Brent Key got in there that it looked like a completely different team that could compete. They didn't run with Georgia or anything, but they were able to get some wins against ranked opponents. They beat Pitt, as I said, and they beat UNC. Both were on the road, so for someone who's in the interim, that's pretty impressive. And I think it goes to show the ability that Key has as a head coach, and also it kind of highlights how Jeff Collins just wasn't ready for a Power 5 job. He was the head coach at Temple for 2 seasons, and then they wanted to throw him into the fire, basically, by giving him that Power 5 job. And Georgia Tech is a really hard job. You have to play Clemson and Georgia every year at minimum, and those are the 2 best programs, well, 2 of the best programs in the country. And so the position that Georgia Tech is in, that's almost 2 automatic losses every year. So starting from that point, that's already pretty bad. Then you have to consider the 50-50 games that can go either way. And from there, you can see why Georgia Tech hasn't made a bowl game in a while. I believe 2017, 2018 was their last bowl game, the year that Paul Johnson retired. So, yeah. So it's a really interesting time. Key, like I said, he's bringing energy back into the program by putting together this really good recruiting class. So he wants to have a somewhat impressive year to make sure that these recruits don't see that, they're possibly making a mistake. So let's talk about strengths. Well, I think quarterback is a strength. I think Haynes King has the potential. He has the capability to be a really good starting quarterback. And it helps that he's gone to the ACC and he's with a first-year head coach that's also learning with him, so that he comes from a position where he's flexible with how he runs things. He's not a Jimbo Fisher that is set in stone. He has that success. He has that arrogance that only recently got reversed with hiring Bobby Petrino to bring his offense and his play calling. So I think this is a good move for Haynes King in terms of he's starting off fresh with a completely new head coach, first-year head coach. Secondary was very good for Georgia Tech. They lost a few defensive backs. Derek Allen transferred to North Carolina. He wasn't a starter. He was just in the rotation. But I think you're still going to be good at defensive back. Georgia Tech has had a somewhat quietly good quality secondary that has gotten interceptions. They picked off Drake May. They can lock down from time to time, and it can really frustrate an offense. So secondary, definitely up there. And then offensive line. Brent Key comes from Alabama. He was the offensive line coach there. Helped Saban win some national titles. And so I don't think it's a surprise for me to say that O-line is one of their strengths. I think their run blocking is a lot better than their pass blocking so far, but I'm sure that's something that Brent Key is working on right now. So I think Dante Smith, who's the running back that I would expect to be the starting running back, is going to have some quality performances behind the offensive line. And then Haynes King, depending on how much he's allowed to shift pass protection from what he sees, not saying that the coaches will limit him, but what he on his own will see with blitzes and such will allow him to shift protection, will really help the offensive line look as good as it should be. Weaknesses, defensive line. Defensive line has always been a problem at Georgia Tech. You have undersized guys. I would look to see their defensive line improve over the years if they can actually keep Key around with an improved record and an improved performance on the field. Also, linebacker. I think linebacker is something that is also a situation where they're undersized, but I think getting that Texas A&M transfer, Andre White Jr., and developing the guys that you currently have there, it can be a solid group. But start out with the Key era, it's a game of being undersized. So they're going to have to find ways to level the playing field with that and create stops, turnovers, things like that, negative plays. So let's get into the schedule. First, you start off with Louisville. Louisville has a new coach, Jeff Brom from Purdue, and I think they're in a rebuilding phase, obviously with losing Scott Satterfield to Cincinnati. Jeff Brom will definitely get the Louisville program in a place where they are competing at a high level. He had that at Purdue. But it's going to take a few years. You have to get the program in the right position. You have to get the scheme that you want, both offensively and defensively. You have to get the players that you know will fit that system. And it's going to take a while. You still have the Satterfield players. So you're playing in Atlanta, but not at Bobby Dodd. You're playing in the Falcons Stadium. This is something that Georgia Tech does once every year as, sort of a recruiting gimmick. You come to Georgia Tech, you get to play in this NFL stadium. But most teams get to play in NFL stadiums at least once. So I'm not sure how this is special. I guess you're guaranteed to play in at least 2 if you make a bowl game, But I really don't. They have a stadium. Why not just play in the stadium? Bobby Dodd Stadium. But anyway, technically two first-year head coaches where they are, because Key was in the interim last year for I think it was 6 games in total. But I think Georgia Tech is at home. That's huge for a game like this. And Haynes King is more experienced at the Power 5 level than the Louisville quarterback, whoever it turns out to be. And that's another thing. I don't think Louisville has, they don't have Lamar Jackson. They don't have Malik Cunningham. Their backups to Malik Cunningham were not that impressive. And as far as I know, Jeff Brom didn't bring in anybody that was that impressive. So I will have to say that Georgia Tech gets the win. There's just too much experience at the quarterback position. Their running game will be pretty good. So I think you've got the win here. Technically at home, but not in your stadium. But yeah, and then you go to play, you don't go to play, you stay home in Bobby Dodd and actually play a game in your stadium against South Carolina State. This should be a win. Brent Key is proof that when he plays an inferior opponent, as long as there's nothing super tragic like an injury, he can get it done. The Virginia game they should have won, but the starting, Jeff Sims got hurt, and I have almost no doubt in my mind that if Jeff Sims stays healthy in that Virginia game, Georgia Tech wins and they actually make a bowl game. So that's my thoughts on that. South Carolina State, you win. And then you play at Ole Miss. This is a loss. Ole Miss's offense is high scoring. Their defense, while not one of the best in the SEC, it's still an SEC defense, and it's going to have its viciousness. Haynes King has seen those defenses. He's seen Ole Miss's defense, particularly since Texas A&M and Ole Miss are SEC West members. But I don't think the talent stacks up just yet, or the development. So I think Key can get Georgia Tech there to this point where they're competing in games like this. But obviously it's going to take a while. A loss, but there is some sliver of hope for Georgia Tech fans. You could come out, Ole Miss might be flat. You come out and you just play a little bit better, a little more on top of things, and you get the win, but I think it's a loss. And then you go at Wake Forest. Wake Forest is also in a rebuilding year, not because of a new head coach, but because of the quarterback they lost. So I think you've got a very good chance of winning this game, simply because of your quarterback room stacking up against theirs. Mitch Griffiths, he did play last year, but he didn't play against Power 5 opponents. So I'm going to say that you win at Winston-Salem simply because top to bottom you are a better team. These are two really good coaches in terms of motivation. Dave Clawson has done a really good job at Wake Forest. He's gotten their second ever 10-win season, which is hard to do at Wake Forest. Obviously, it's only happened 2 times in their entire history. So yeah, a win at Wake Forest. And then you play Bowling Green. Again, this should be a win. So after 5 weeks, you're 4-1. As you go on a road trip to Miami. Now, Miami, you would think, would be the better team, simply because of where they're starting at with a second-year head coach. They have Tyler Van Dyke, who's been proven at the Power 5 level. But here's the thing. Weird things have been starting to happen at Miami. They lose to Middle Tennessee State last year. Bad defensive back coverage really hurt them. They didn't have consistent offense. And they just got shaken up by some things. They did beat Georgia Tech last year, but I think Georgia Tech gets revenge and gets an upset win in Miami, and they go to 5-1 to start off the year. Then they get their bye week. Before they go, they have to play the Boston College Eagles. This is also a win. If you see my Boston College video, I think that Boston College offensive struggles continue against the Georgia Tech secondary. Their running back room at Boston College needs improvement, and by this point in the year, it'll be a little bit better, but I don't think it's enough to get past Georgia Tech in terms of points, because Boston College's secondary is not going to be as good as Georgia Tech's. Haynes King, his throwing ability stacks up to almost anyone else in the Power 5. His real struggle has been reading defenses, but since the secondary itself at Boston College is at the level that it is, I don't think it'll be a problem. So you get a win against Boston College at home. Then North Carolina, number 21, comes. So this was a game that Georgia Tech won on the road against a ranked North Carolina team. So what was key to that? Well, they disrupted Drake May. Drake May made a lot of mistakes and did not look like the Drake May that we had seen. Does that happen again? Possibly. I think it'll be a high-scoring game, but that's characteristic of all North Carolina games because their defense is not great. And I think Your secondary will help you in getting some stops here, but I think ultimately Drake May, he's fueled by his want of revenge, and I think he does get revenge, and you lose to North Carolina at home. Then you play at Virginia. You get some revenge, and you get a win there. Virginia, my heart goes out to Virginia for how their season ended last year. It's just a horrible tragedy that no group of people should go through. But from the football perspective, they're still rebuilding, still recovering from that tragedy. And Tony Elliott, he's got his work cut out for him there. He's trying to build something, and it's just going to take a while because Virginia does not have that football history. They don't have the financial support. He really has to focus on development. Every 3 or 4 years, putting together a good, experienced team that has been through the battles and competing at a high level. And it's something that you can do at Virginia. And I think Tony Elliott is the type of guy to do it. So I win at Virginia. Yeah. And then you go at Clemson. You go to Clemson, sorry. This is a loss, obviously. Clemson's defensive line is stacked, always has been. Their secondary is very good. Haynes King would have to play out of his mind to win this game. The defense of Georgia Tech, if the Clemson offense has the same struggles that it's had against good defensive performances, you could stay close in this game, but I think it's a loss, especially since it's at Clemson. That really hurts. So yeah, and then home game against Syracuse. I think this is a win. This is a team that also has the same style of coach with Dino Babers. Likes to motivate his players as much as possible, and he does get a lot out of them. But I think since you're at home, your secondary has about the same level of same level or a little bit higher promise than Syracuse's. It's really going to come down to stopping the run, which I think you do, and I think they struggle with a bit. And so you get the win against Syracuse. And then finally you end the year against your SEC opponent, yearly SEC opponent, Georgia, who's number 1, the reigning national champions. This is a loss. Georgia Tech hasn't won in Atlanta against Georgia since 1999. Until it happens, I'm not going to pick it to happen because there's no evidence that points to this being the year. I think Georgia Tech can get there. I've said that a lot this video. The way that the program is going in terms of the recruiting class, you have a lot of potential. You also have to perform on the field. Jeff Collins learned that. If you don't have the performance on the field as well as you do off the field, then you're going to get the boot. So really focus on getting back to a bowl game that is so big, which I have you doing. You are 8-4. Yeah, 8-4, which will get you to a bowl game. And 8-4, that's respectable for where Georgia Tech's been for the last few years. And I think it's possible. And you look at some of these games. Louisville, definitely a toss-up game though, but one that you can win. Obviously, you have almost guaranteed wins with South Carolina State and Bowling Green. I think Wake Forest is pretty much a guaranteed win. Boston College, you have a good advantage there. Virginia, you have a good advantage there. Miami, who knows? Syracuse, I think you have a good advantage there. So really, you have some games where I would expect you to do pretty well in your performance and get back to that bowl game. So I want to thank everyone for watching. Everyone who subscribed, thank you very much. I'll see you next time when we do the Louisville Cardinals.